Thanks for waiting around. If you're wondering what happened to Apple, we have dark mode and the cheese grater. So, right. So my name's Josh, and I'm a designer for the transport division of Booking.com, and we're actually just based around the corner from here. So it was quite nice to walk here. So today I'm going to tell you about what Booking's doing in terms of the world of transport. So I'm pretty sure that you're all familiar with who Booking.com are. And it's a company that primarily feels a little bit like this. But we're going through a transition at the moment to more of a business that feels a little bit more like this. So it's a business that helps customers with all elements of their trip, whether that's transport, attractions, exploration, food, and other things as well. And of course, we still have a very lovely hotel in the center of everything. And we like to call this the connected trip. So what is the connected trip? Well, a trip is complicated, and it starts early. It starts with getting inspired. What am I going to do? Where am I going to go? How much do I want to spend? And all those sorts of things. So, yeah, a trip is very complicated. But we do know one thing for certain. And being from the transport division, we've done quite a bit of research on this. And the key message is that every trip involves transport, and ground transport to be more exact, whether that be cars, trains, taxis, electric scooters, for example. There's a question, though. How many legs do you think there is in a typical trip? Anyone want to have a guess? That's actually exact. It's not. It's about. We think it's about 10, and that's from home to airport, flight, and then it gets really interesting when you get to the end and all the plethora sorts of transport from your hotel to attractions and food, and that's kind of where all that flexibility and excitement comes from. And there's one thing that we think at Booking.com that transport should be, and we think it should be frictionless. But the problem is, and the reality of the world is that transport it isn't frictionless at all. There's kind of like a bombardment of choice and variety and different types of transport and different places to research what you're going to do and where you're going to go. I'm sure some of you can probably see some of your logos on there as well, so I apologize for that. And that's even before you get there. So even with some of the best information design out there by draftsman Harry Beck, we all know that even the tube's a bit complicated, right? Londoners like to have a moan about tourists on the Piccadilly line, for example. My mom's lived in England all her life, and she thinks that it's a dark art using your contactless card to open the gates, for example. And, God knows about the circle, which is Heathrow terminals. So, you can imagine the nuances of travel in England, for example. If you had a layer of complexity where there's a massive language barrier also, you don't know what's going on, you can start to understand why transport isn't simple at all. It is actually quite complicated. So the journey at Booking.com actually started before I was there, but it was an experiment what we did. We were wanting to test in Amsterdam different ways of helping our customers with ground transport. We already had rentalcars.com, which is one of the largest car rental brokers. But we didn't have any other options like the ones I've mentioned, like trains, buses, taxis. And we wanted to find out how and when our customers use them. So we asked a variety of customers, post-trip or in-trip, and gave them a range of relevant local options to see why they would, and give them the option to buy it through our site. And that was a great signal for us. We got great reviews. We got a great score off that. So it was a great signal to say that actually, within a connected trip ecosystem, offering transport is a good thing. Which brings me on to, so what are we doing in London? And this is actually our new office, but we're not there yet, so this is smoke and mirrors for that. So we're focusing on primarily the Booking.com app, and we're working on, we call it 2 projects, but it's actually just one, really, and it's on-demand taxis and a pre-booked taxi service. So I've wrapped that up very succinctly into taxi apps. So this very long mission that we wanted to achieve was we wanted to allow Booking.com customers who are traveling the world to be able to use local ride-hailing companies and small companies with one unified, simple experience, be able to pay for that in the simplest way. So, wherever you're going in the world, transport is as frictionless as it can be for now. So I don't know if any of you read TechCrunch, but we've been busy. So we invested in Didi, which is the largest on-demand taxi provider in China. And second to that, more recently, in Grab, which services Southeast Asia. So these are our two partners for now on our on-demand project. And what the ambition was is to create a ride-hailing experience that works seamlessly for travelers. So tying into an ecosystem of a connected trip. So travelers didn't have to do this, which is, go to wishy-washy travel blogs to try and work out how to turn on the English setting on the Didi app and work out the complexities of how to pay with WeChat if you've never done that in an ecosystem before. However, the actual things around that, it sounds nice, but there are subtle differences in the physical experience as well as ride-hailing in different parts of the world. And one of the things that we found through dog fooding in the Didi app, oh, no, I've ruined it, no. There we go, let's go back. There you go. So through dog fooding in the Didi app, almost every time that you hail a cab, the driver will call you and say, did you actually want this? And then you go, well, yeah, I called the cab. So, and one of our colleagues who lives and works in Beijing, when they order on demand, almost instantly after requesting, opens up the chat application and says, yes, I want the cab. Almost. So you can understand that there's a lot of nuances around how these things work in different parts of the world. Contradictorily to that, in some of our interviews, what happens with some of our users who are traveling there and don't speak Mandarin, a taxi driver will call them, realize that they cannot speak Mandarin, and then just go, no, canceling the ride. I don't want to deal with that. So there's a lot of nuances that we have to account for, especially with that pickup experience. And when there's quotes like, we just winged it to try and get in the taxi when we've interviewed people, we know fundamentally that we have to pay so much attention to the contact driver and the pickup experience. And we're fairly new to this world, so finding out all of these nuances is quite interesting. So I want to share with you some of the problems that we've been tackling, trying to build into this problem space. And one of the things which may not know, this is like industry terminology, but it's called points of interest. And a point of interest, or POI for short, is a place that is marked on a map where drivers can pick you up. Actually, we saw some examples of that earlier in the previous talk. And you may see these in airports, for example. Taking ride-hailing in London is actually quite common now. For the rest of England, at the moment, it's more of the exception, not the rule. However, for example, with Didi, they have mapped the entire of China with POIs, and they have an entire team dedicated to it. And not only for your pickup location, but for your drop-off location. So actually their service, you can't get picked up from anywhere. You can get picked up from specific places, which is actually quite a challenge for us as we're trying to build a supplier-agnostic platform. So a little bit of our user flow, right? We only really know who the supplier is afterwards. And that box there is when we can tap into our suppliers' points of interest. So our flow by technology at the moment is almost a little backwards for the suppliers we're working with. And also in testing, and this was one of the very early prototypes that we looked at, our users didn't get this at all with POIs. One anecdote which I love, we got told that our taxi icons weren't very good and we needed to redo them because it was assumed that those targets were taxis, which I just think is brilliant. But there you go, you're always surprised, always curious, etc. So we kind of like thought about this, and we wanted to like, could you be a little bit clever with it? Can you remove that POI flow? Can we just like select one for you and just, I guess, make a best estimated guess off the data that we had? The problem was that actually that was even more surprising than not giving a user a choice. Going straight from a select screen straight into here, your taxes on the way wasn't the right thing. So actually framing it more as a let's refine that down, and then using subtle UI to just make it look like a dot and a point, communicated it in a much better light, and that's what we found out for that. So I just wanted to share that little anecdote as we crash into taxes. And here's like I guess a little GIF of what we propose that on-demand taxes will look like within Booking.com app for now. You'll be able to select your supplier, your payment information will be saved, everything will be through the Booking.com ecosystem. And then from there, you'll be able to take a taxi in China as something that you would expect. The interesting parts are the entry points where, where does this contextually sit within the journey? Because we know a lot about you, like your trip, your arrival date, etc. Which brings me on quite nicely into airport transfers, who is the best PO I've worked with. So like the second part of the, I guess the connected trip is this pre-booked service, right? So this is a bit more of a premeditated thing. I want one less thing to worry about. I want this to be a less anxious experience that I'm going to a foreign country. I've got 3 kids. I need a booster seat, for example. Taxi.booking.com or Rideways, which it was also branded for a while, existed. It's existed for a while. So we knew a lot about this audience. This isn't this is a little bit more of a known space for us. So we could gauge data from it. And with the app project, we wanted to do something a little bit more personalized for a first version. So the graph with the 2 big green bars, all that communicates is that the pickup points for all of these are always an airport, and the drop-off points was always the hotel you were going to stay at. And that pretty much was roughly, give or take, about 70% of our business. And when we mapped that in one of these design sprints, it became apparent that we do actually know quite a lot about our customer. So, we could infer an arrival date because we know your check-in date. We could infer a destination because we know where the hotel is. And we already had your payment information because you booked, hopefully, through Booking.com, and you've saved that payment method, right? We also then discovered that most of our users add their flight numbers when they're booking for an airport transfer. And the arrival number overwrites whatever time you enter anyway, because the drivers just track your flight and they will turn up when your flight arrives if they're behaving. So this is kind of the beginning of what we think what resembles a connected trip in terms of transport. So with just a flight number, we can get you an airport taxi in hopefully a few screens. So, with just that one piece of information, so we're inferring that you want to go to your hotel. The communication is, hey, you've booked this hotel. Why don't we get you there? Worry about one less thing. So this is just a little GIF of what we propose that to be. So I guess finally what I want to talk about and to wrap up is the near future, right? As we've began building the foundations for what transport booking looks like. Holistically speaking, we want to bring all of this together. So one of the things that we will be doing is trialing free rides for hotel customers, for example, because we're not thinking about profit in terms of rides taken, but it's more of a adding customer value, and that's really what it's all about in terms of transport. And over time, you will see that the Booking.com app will become this more multi-channel thing. So you'll be able to see your car rentals, your bookings, the taxis upcoming, amongst other things, and hopefully allow our customers to do a little bit less of this and a little bit more of this. And that's me. Thanks.
Who wants this weird marshmallow thing? That's a good question. I'm going to knock the camera if I throw it to you, but maybe after these people here. Actually, behind you, sorry. Ready?
Thank God. Thanks, that was a really interesting presentation. You must get this all the time, but why will people choose you over Uber or Lyft?
Like, that's the only question I ever get asked. So I think if you take it as a face value, it's a very good question. However, especially in China, for if we take Didi for example, Uber doesn't exist, right? And if you take another example of like Budapest, there's a lot of blogs around the specific types of taxis you should and shouldn't take. And again, your home brands may not exist in the territories that we are initially working in. So when you add that to what a connected trip will be in terms of, for example, a one-tap button, get me back to my hotel, and Booking.com is a trusted brand. The second part of that is when we've interviewed and asked that question to our users, actually the saved payment methods is one of the great USPs for us, is that actually you're reducing friction because we don't have to try and fight through all these payment methods. So we're not trying to compete. We're trying to sort of enable travelers to experience travel in a way that they're used to.
How do you you mentioned that in China, for example, the driver will call the passenger immediately to confirm that they want the ride. Or you showed another example of the rider having notes saying, I have children and suitcases. How do you get over those translation and linguistic issues? Have you got a solution for that?
In short, we're working on it, but we're working with like a very sophisticated translation engine, which also kind of works out slang from both ends as well. Unfortunately, like our solution at the moment relies on text and translation. We're working on other ways to actually help that pickup experience be better as well. One anecdote is actually, if you go to China on holiday, usually your hotel will give you a piece of paper in the symbol saying that this is the address. If we could translate that into more of a digital experience, that is, some things that we're thinking about.
Okay, I'm just going with him. Who am I throwing it to?
Yeah. No, you need the mic. Hold on. You got it?
Wow. Okay. Well, so thanks for the talk. It was awesome. A lot of stuff you said I didn't know about at all. And I thought I was like up to date with stuff. So thanks a lot. So this is less of a question, more of an announcement. So I hope I don't get in trouble with Monzo and the organizers. But I work for an electric vehicle company, Arrival. You can check them out, arrival.com. So we design vehicles from ground up. They look quite futuristic. And I'm a UX product designer myself. We're looking for more UX product designers. So if you're interested, speak to us. And not to Monzo. Just kidding. That's it. Thank you. Shameless, I know.
Okay, any more emphasis on the questions? You want to ask a question? Here you are.
Yeah. So first of all, Uber has the market in China. It's just Uber is working with Didi. They're working together. Uber China.
It's slightly correct. Yes, one got bought by the other. So I mean,
Yeah.
The one thing, like, there is a map somewhere where like you can map out every single supplier of on-demand transport, and they all kind of have shares in each other. So it's a very tangled thing.
So I just correct you that Uber exists in China. Anyway, my question is that in the project you talked about the Didi apps in Beijing. I'm wondering, because it's all designed in English, I assume that's for both local Chinese people and also the foreigners. So how do you, there are culture difference. have you done any research in that area, like local Chinese people's the behavior of using this app and the foreigners who travel there and they may using the app? Like any research about that?
No, because our focus at the moment is primarily on non-nationals. So we're working So this isn't live yet, and it will go under an experiment where you have booked a trip to China, you have a safe payment method, and that's how we will kind of gauge how it's going to work. It's definitely something that we're going to do in the future. But thanks.
Yeah, right here. That was easy. There you go.
Hi, Josh. Thanks for the presentation. Are the hotels that you work with aware that you are trying out this feature? For example, is it in parity agreements that you have with the hotels? Because there are hotels that do offer airport transfers.
I guess the quickest way to answer that is no. I get the way that the Booking.com's product structure is kind of split up into lots and lots and lots of different tracks, and you would say that hotels is kind of core, and then there is another which is called experiences, and we're working on a lot of different things, including taxis. Another one would be cinema tickets, for example. So I think that will all kind of happen when we start to merge this into one connected trip fully in a full experience. However, we probably may offer that through some sort of way, but I'm not really at liberty to say anything about that.
Hi, a quick question. Just wondering if you're planning to add any rail links like Heathrow Express or Gatwick Express. Thanks.
Maybe. I can't. Yeah, that. So.
There's a great app for that already.
Yeah. Sorry, just to kind of like embellish on that a little bit. In London, there is a taxi apps team, and then we have another team, which is the ticketed team, which are working on something similar.
Would you say that Booking.com is tackling inclusivity by crossing language barriers, and that's how other companies are addressing inclusivity?
So, is the question around how Booking.com tackles inclusivity through translations?
Tackling. Oh, sorry. Thank you. What I'm trying to say is tackling. Okay, is one way that Booking.com tackling inclusivity is by crossing those kind of language barriers.
Yeah, I think it's a great thing to do. Like at the forefront of our mind is just to make travel the easiest possible and most like delightful experience that it can be, and like just enjoy. The emphasis is on experiences. We want our customers to experience. So breaking down language barriers and making the to and from and that very small part of your trip like forgettable. That's kind of what we're trying to aim to strive to. If that kind of answers your question.
Hi. Okay. Hi. Thanks for the presentation. So you guys are clearly trying to build an end-to-end platform for travel. But how do you kind of like balance that with people who just want to access a specific service? In a demo you presented, you were kind of showing, what you assume people wanted from like booking a hotel, and how do you balance that with, I guess, your history with Booking.com, and how you kind of force sometimes.
So is the question that like our brand position that
But
Booking.com?
my question is, how do you balance your vision of creating an end-to-end platform with people who just want to access specific services you offer?
So there's definitely, and it will start happening even more. There's definitely a lot of cross-sell in between those different payment silos. So you will see, for example, on the Booking.com app, we always ask if you want to rent a car now when you purchase a hotel, for example. The way that the app is like evolving and some of the things that we're doing, which I can't show, we're definitely kind of breaking down those silos and hopefully positioning ourselves to be more trip-centric in different methods. We're also hiring.